Ever get that feeling, when you're really digging into something and suddenly you see these like unexpected connections across different fields?
Yeah.
It's like, bam, it hits you. That's kind of what we're doing today, diving into the world of polymaths.
I love it.
Those fascinating people whose knowledge just spans across multiple disciplines. And get this, we're going way beyond the usual suspects, like your Da Vinci's.
Right.
Get ready to uncover a much richer global history of versatility than you might expect.
Yeah, it's funny. The word polymath itself, it's actually relatively recent.
Really?
But the concept, it's ancient. And you're right. We often picture like Europe when we think about this. But polymaths were like lighting up the world long before the Renaissance in places we might not expect.
I've always been kind of fascinated by ancient Egypt. And when I was prepping for this deep dive, I stumbled upon Imhotep.
Oh, nice.
Not the guy from The Mummy, although that movie was like my jam back in the day. But the real deal, Imhotep.
Right. The OG. This guy, he designed the step pyramid at Saqqara.
Oh, wow.
And we're talking way back, around 2650 BC.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. But then on top of that, you realize he wasn't just an architect.
No?
This was a man who was also a physician, a priest, and an astronomer.
Oh, my gosh. Talk about a multi-hyphenate career.
Oh.
Makes you think about the limits we put on ourselves,
It really does.
And speaking of pushing boundaries, we got to talk about ancient Greece. Figures like Aristotle.
Oh, man, blew my mind.
Aristotle, yeah, he's a prime example of how polymaths, they don't just gather knowledge.
They synthesize it. He was not content with just mastering one field.
Right.
This is a guy, student of Plato, later on becomes the tutor of Alexander the Great. But beyond that, his expertise, it spanned from physics, metaphysics, to poetry, theater, music, logic, rhetoric, politics, ethics, biology, zoology.
Wow.
You name it, he probably studied it.
That's not a resume, that's an encyclopedia.
Right.
But it makes you wonder, with that kind of range, what incredible connections was he making between, say, ethics and biology? What did he see that others missed?
That is a question that still resonates today. And it reminds us that being a polymath, it wasn't just about amassing knowledge.
Yeah.
It was about finding those threads that connect seemingly totally different fields. And it wasn't just a Western phenomenon either.
Oh, for sure.
We often overlook the incredible contributions of polymaths from other parts of the world.
Totally. I was reading this fascinating article, I think it was just the other day, about non-Western polymaths. And one figure really stood out to me. Al-Khwarizmi.
Oh, yeah.
A Persian mathematician.
Yeah.
Revolutionized the way we understand numbers.
Essential to our world today, even if we don't realize it.
Really?
Yeah. This is the guy that gave us algebra, algorithms.
What?
Every time you do a Google search, you're using an algorithm.
Wow.
It has its roots in his work.
It's mind-blowing when you think about it,
It is. It is.
These innovations, we take them for granted.
Totally.
They're such deep roots. Okay, so we've seen how polymathy flourished in ancient civilizations. But what about the Renaissance? That era always seemed to be, like, obsessed with human potential.
Oh, totally. They were all about pushing those boundaries, weren't they?
Yeah.
Of what humans could achieve, driven by this idea of the universal human, this belief that, we weren't limited to just one area of expertise.
And when we talk Renaissance, we got to talk about Leonardo da Vinci.
Of course, right.
Like the quintessential Renaissance man, right?
Yeah. Artist, inventor, engineer, the list, it goes on.
I know, it's endless.
He's the poster child for a reason,
He is.
But again, it's important to remember that it wasn't just about being good at lots of things.
Right.
Da Vinci, he was a master at applying knowledge across disciplines. He saw the interconnectedness of it all. He used mathematical principles like the golden ratio to, elevate both his art and his engineering.
Wow.
His notebooks are legendary for a reason.
I bet it's like he saw the world as this giant web of knowledge.
Yes.
And he was just constantly finding new connections between the threads.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's about depth and breadth. And the magic really happens in those connections.
It does.
But what happened after the Renaissance? Did the idea of the polymath just fade away as we moved into the Enlightenment?
Not at all, no. The Enlightenment brought a more scientific approach, sure.
Okay.
But polymathy was alive and well. In fact, some of the most celebrated figures of that era, polymaths themselves.
Right. Like Isaac Newton.
Exactly.
Like he didn't just revolutionize physics with his laws of motion, gravity, but also reshape mathematics with his invention of calculus. It's incredible.
It is.
And then there's Benjamin Franklin,
Oh, yeah.
a true embodiment of the Enlightenment spirit.
Right.
Inventor, statesman, writer, diplomat, scientist, activist.
I know. This guy never slowed down.
He makes me feel exhausted just thinking about it.
Right.
But you're right, the Enlightenment also saw a rise in specialization.
It did.
With so much new knowledge emerging,
Yeah.
it became really difficult for individuals to master multiple fields.
Totally.
So did this mean the end of the polymath?
That's the big question, right?
It is. Did the rise of the specialist, make the polymath obsolete?
Some would argue that with our world becoming more and more complex, polymaths are actually even more important than ever. Yeah. I mean, who better to connect the dots between different fields, bring together those diverse perspectives, right?
So instead of being a relic of the past, the polymath becomes essential for navigating the future.
Exactly.
I like that. But it still makes me wonder, what does it actually mean to be a polymath today?
Right.
Is it as simple as, having a bunch of hobbies and calling yourself well-rounded?
Well, there's definitely more to it than that.
Yep.
I mean, true polymathy, it runs deeper than just dabbling. It's about recognizing those surprising connections between things,
Yeah.
finding those hidden threads that weave their way through seemingly unrelated fields.
It reminds me of something I was reading, actually, while I was prepping for our deep dive.
Oh, tell me.
There's actually a proven link between studying music and having a higher IQ. It's true.
Yeah.
And apparently, Nobel Prize-winning scientists, they're 25 times more likely to be involved in the arts than their average counterparts.
Wow.
I mean, what does that tell you?
It tells me there's some fascinating synergy happening there.
Right.
It's not just about accumulating knowledge in different areas. It's about how those areas actually interact with each other and enhance one another.
It's like our brains are wired to make those connections.
Yeah.
And exploring multiple fields actually makes us smarter, more adaptable, more creative.
I totally agree. And it raises an important question for all of us, I think.
What's that?
Are we too quick to categorize ourselves and our interests, especially in today's world?
Oh, 100%.
Do we limit ourselves by saying, I'm a tech person or, I'm an artist without even exploring that potential overlap?
I'm so guilty of that too. I get hyper-focused on something and just forget to even look up and around.
Yeah.
But you look back at these historical polymaths, the Da Vincis, the Aristotles, they weren't bound by those limitations. They were driven by this pure curiosity to just understand the world in all its messy complexity.
Exactly. And, it makes you wonder, does our modern education system, with its emphasis on specialization, does it actually stifle that natural curiosity, that polymathic potential that maybe we all have within us?
That's a question worth pondering, for sure. But hold on, this is where it gets really interesting. There's this study, right, where researchers followed a bunch of students as they were trying to tackle this really tricky math problem.
Oh, okay. Which one?
It's called Russell's paradox.
Ah, yes, Russell's paradox. A real brain twister, exploring those contradictions in set theory.
Exactly. So they found that the students who were the most engaged with the problem, the ones really digging in, wrestling with it,
Yeah.
those students, they also showed more polymathic thinking traits.
That makes sense. I mean, to grapple with a paradox like that, you have to be able to look at it from all these different angles, right?
Yeah.
Challenge those assumptions, connect ideas in new ways, all those hallmarks of polymathic thinking.
Exactly. So maybe it's not just about the knowledge we accumulate, but how we approach knowledge in the first place.
Right.
How we think.
It's the process.
How willing we are to step outside those comfort zones.
I love that. And that is something we can all cultivate, regardless of what your background is, what your profession is.
Yeah.
It's about fostering that sense of intellectual playfulness.
I like that.
That willingness to just venture outside of those comfort zones and say, what if?
It reminds me of that famous quote, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing."
Socrates, right.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good one. A sentiment that's been echoed by so many throughout history. And it's true, that sense of humility, right? Recognizing the vastness of knowledge and our own limitations. That's essential for anyone, I think, who is seeking to be a polymath.
It's about embracing that lifelong journey of learning and discovery, always being open to those new connections, those possibilities, being a student of the world, not just a student of, one particular subject.
Beautifully put. And that leads us to, I think, a crucial point.
Yeah.
Polymathy, it's not a destination.
Oh, interesting.
It's a journey. It's not about, achieving this mythical status of universal genius.
Right.
It's about constantly pushing your own boundaries, intellectually, creatively.
So it's not about being a jack of all trades, but about being a master of connection.
Yes.
Finding those hidden links between our passions, our skills, and the world around us.
Yes. And you know those connections. Those are what drive innovation and progress. Think about it. How many breakthroughs have come from combining knowledge from totally different fields?
That's a good point.
The printing press, the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Even the way we understand the human body all came about through this kind of interdisciplinary thinking.
And what about those everyday innovations?
Yeah.
The solutions we find to problems at work, the creative projects we do in our free time. I feel like those often come from connecting the dots in those unexpected ways, bringing together our own, diverse interests and experiences.
Absolutely. And that's why polymathy is so relevant today, perhaps even more so than in the past. Because in a world that's, hyper-focused on specialization, we need those individuals who can see the forest for the trees, who can bridge those gaps between disciplines and find those creative solutions that, others might miss.
But let's be honest. In a world that values efficiency, productivity so much, dedicating time to multiple pursuits can feel, indulgent, even frivolous at times.
Right, and that's a common misconception. The beauty of polymathy is that it's not about, dividing your time and energy between all these different pursuits. It's about finding that synergy between them. It's about allowing your passions to inform each other, create this richer, more holistic understanding of yourself and the world.
It's like those polymaths we were talking about earlier. Da Vinci, Aristotle, Imhotep. They weren't just accumulating knowledge in these different fields. They were using that knowledge to enhance their work in other areas. It was all connected.
Exactly. Think of it as cross-pollination, You're allowing your diverse interests to nourish each other, to spark those new ideas, those insights that you might never have discovered if you stayed in just one little lane.
So it's not about being a Renaissance man or a universal genius.
Yeah, not at all.
It's about tapping into that innate human potential for versatility and connection, finding the threads that weave through all our passions, our pursuits.
And recognizing that those connections, they're not just intellectually stimulating, They're deeply rewarding on a personal level, too.
Yeah.
There's a special kind of joy in those aha moments, those unexpected links between seemingly completely different fields. It's like finding buried treasure.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'm sold. So how do we actually cultivate this polymathic mindset? How do we break free from those self-imposed limitations and embrace our inner Leonardo, so to speak?
It all starts with curiosity. Ask yourself, what genuinely interests me? And not just within, my current job or field of study.
Yeah.
What sparks your imagination? What makes you want to learn more, even if it seems completely unrelated to anything else you do?
So it's about following those threads of curiosity wherever they lead, even down the rabbit hole.
Exactly. It's about exposing yourself to new perspectives, new ways of thinking, and don't be afraid of the unexpected, Sometimes the most serendipitous connections, they happen when you least expect them.
It's like that saying, chance favors the prepared mind.
Ooh, I like that one.
The more we expose ourselves to those new ideas, those new experiences, the more likely we are to make those surprising connections, to see the world with fresh eyes.
And that is the essence of polymathy, I think. It's cultivating a mind that's just ready for anything.
Wow.
A mind that's constantly seeking out those hidden connections, those aha moments that can lead to new insights, new creations, and new ways of being in the world.
This is inspiring. But let's be real for a second. Not everyone's going to become a Da Vinci or an Aristotle, right?
True, but that's not the point, is it?
Right.
Polymathy, it's not about reaching some level of, extraordinary genius.
Yeah.
It's about embracing that potential that's within each of us to learn, to grow, and to connect in ways that are meaningful and fulfilling for us.
So it's not about becoming a polymath with a capital P.
Exactly.
It's about incorporating those polymathic principles into our own lives, however that looks for us.
Precisely. It's about finding your own unique blend of depth and breadth, your own way of weaving together your passions and your pursuits into a life that's intellectually stimulating, creatively enriching, and just deeply rewarding. It is. It's about finding those unique, expressions of who we are through these multiple lenses.
It's like we each have our own polymathic fingerprint.
I like that. There you go.
Right.
Yeah. And, it's never too late to start exploring those different facets of yourself.
Totally. Never too late to learn something new.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it. Okay, so we've been talking about the individual level, but what about like a larger scale?
Yeah.
Do you think if this kind of interconnected thinking is so valuable, shouldn't we be like encouraging it more broadly?
100%.
Like in our education systems, in our workplaces?
Absolutely. I mean, there's got to be a way to like nurture that polymathic spirit.
There is. In fact, there's a growing movement right now to kind of rethink our whole approach to education.
Really?
Yeah, and move away from this purely specialized model. A lot of educators are starting to recognize the,
limitations.
the limitations exactly of staying siloed in one discipline.
Yeah.
And they're beginning to incorporate more interdisciplinary learning into their curricula.
That's amazing.
It's exciting.
It is exciting. But even outside of like, formal education settings, there's so much we can each do as individuals, right, to cultivate that polymathic spirit in ourselves, in our communities.
Oh, for sure. And it doesn't have to be anything, super complicated. No.
Wow.
I mean, it can be as simple as just picking up a book or reading an article that's, outside your usual areas of interest.
Yeah.
Right. Attending a lecture, going to a workshop on a new topic, even just like striking up a conversation with somebody
Or like
from a totally different background or profession than your own.
it's about being open to those new perspectives.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
those unexpected connections.
So it all really comes back to curiosity, doesn't it?
It does.
That willingness to be open-minded, to never stop learning, no matter what stage of life you're in.
Curiosity. It's the fuel for that lifelong journey of discovery.
I love that.
Oh.
Well, this has been such an insightful conversation. Before we wrap up, is there one key takeaway that you want to leave our listeners with?
Oh, that's a good question.
Something to really mull over as they're going about their day.
I think it'd be this. In a world that, constantly pushes us towards specialization,
Yeah,
don't be afraid to embrace that inner polymath,
love it.
cultivate that curiosity, explore these seemingly totally unrelated interests, and you might be so surprised by what you uncover,
Right.
by the connections you make, and by the potential that unfolds.
Well, I love that. I'm writing that down. Give yourself permission to be more than just one thing.
Yeah.
It's not about being an expert in everything. It's about being open to everything.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe, in the process, you'll find that those seemingly unrelated passions of yours actually complement each other in these like unexpected and beautiful ways.
That's what it's all about, right?
It's about finding those hidden connections. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for diving into this with me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk about this stuff.
And to you listening, we hope this deep dive has, sparked your own curiosity and maybe inspired you to unlock the power of your own versatility.
Yes.
Maybe you have a hidden talent for coding just waiting to be discovered, or a passion for ancient history that could totally inform your work in marketing.
You never know.
You really don't. Whatever those threads of interest might be for you, don't be afraid to follow them. You never know where they might lead. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep diving deep.